Hi everyone, it's Nicole here today with a Waffle Flower January 2019 release card showcase. Today I've got two cards to share with you using a peachy red color scheme, one a Valentine's themed card and the other one a sending hugs thinking of you style card. Both of them have the same color but two completely different types of cards. First, we're going to use the favorite Valentine stamps and dies. I absolutely love when Waffle Flower releases stamp sets with this particular designer because I love the little kid images. I'm always drawn to these. I kind of laid out what I thought I wanted to do first, and then I trimmed down a piece of smooth white cardstock. This is Nina Smooth cardstock to 3 inches by 5.5 inches. It's going to be a strip down the middle of my card, and I'm going to ink up my background doing an ombre effect going from abandoned coral to dried marigold. This is one of my favorite kind of non-traditional Valentine's love themed color combinations that is not pink, it's not red, it's somewhere in between, and it's just a little bit different, and I really like that about it. If you're not a pink person and you want something a little bit different, this is one of my go-tos. I absolutely love these colors together. I think they're really non-traditional and fun. I'm going to work to get a nice seamless ombre blend from dark to light and almost white down there at the bottom of this panel. We don't want to go all the way to the bottom. This kind of naturally gives a stopping point and a great place to finish with our greeting. Then I am taking a Simon Says stamp, large falling hearts stencil, and I'm actually using this on both cards, and doing that same ombre. Abandoned coral to dried marigold, lightening my hand as I get towards the bottom, and I'm not even going to go quite all the way to the bottom with this card. And that's going to create our tone-on-tone background, add instant interest to the background, give it a little something extra. We're going to take the coordinating dies then, and I want to talk a little bit about the dies from Waffle Flower this month. For the first time, they have detabbed their dies, meaning they are not connected with those horrible little tabs that we have to cut apart with wire snips. These come taped to the backing card, and you can put them on your own magnet sheet or whatever you want to do. Some of the stamps, or pardon me, die sets come on magnet sheets if they're larger, which is fantastic. I really don't like cutting them apart, mostly because I stab myself with those tabs all the time. And I've even bled on projects and kind of ruined a couple things. So I'm really hoping, crossing fingers, that this catches on across the industry because I'm not a fan of tabbed dies, but I know it's kind of a necessary evil or whatever it might be, but I'm really excited that Waffle Flower isn't tabbing their dies together anymore. So really exciting news from them to start the year. I've die cut then that large heart kind of from the upper half of this strip, and I'm going to keep both pieces. You're going to notice in the finished card that that middle piece doesn't look like that, but it actually is this heart. And I'm going to show you how I alter that here in a second. I kind of thought I would try to use the heart-shaped stamp on this, but ultimately I decided not to. I kind of played around with it thinking, do I want to stamp the outline? Maybe emboss it in white? Do I want to stamp it in black? Which I didn't really think I wanted to do, and I'm glad I didn't. And ultimately, I just decided I wasn't going to use that stamp at all. Even though you see it laid out here, we're not going to use it. Everything else is going to be used as is. We've got the boy and girl facing each other. We're going to have the little girl holding a letter, the little boy holding a bouquet of flowers. We're going to use the heart with the wings and the heart with the arrow through it, and then a lot of sentiments from this stamp set. We're actually going to use Happy Valentine's Day and then You Are My Favorite. I am customizing my heart now because I really thought to showcase the heart it needed to be a little bit more solid, and it's going to show off the stamped and embossed sentiment a lot better. So I'm going to go over the whole heart with abandoned coral, and it's going to cover up the stenciling and inking we did previously perfectly. I played around with different colors to kind of frame up this strip down the middle of my card. I thought about gold glitter, gold matte, gold pearl cardstock. I mean, I played with everything. And ultimately, none of those were really what I wanted. So I created my own by taking a scrap of the white cardstock that I had trimmed down for this panel, and I'm going to ink up this strip with abandoned coral distress ink. Trim this into thin strips that I can then place behind, and it's going to really nicely frame up this stenciled and inked strip and coordinate perfectly. So if you ever have trouble finding exactly the color of cardstock to match what you are using on your card, creating your own with ink is always a great way to go if you just can't find exactly what you want in your stash to match. Now, I originally trimmed this down a little bit wider, thinking it was going to be hidden back behind the panel, and normally it would, but I'm going to be popping up this panel, so the panel with the strips down the side and the middle panel with foam adhesive, and placing the heart directly on the card base itself, just to kind of frame it up a little bit more. So I need to trim down those strips a little bit so that they're not sticking into the heart die cut shape. And then I'm going to flip this over and run a strip of adhesive down each side, and then just kind of frame this up. I'm eyeballing it. I did not measure it exactly. It's probably about 1/8 of an inch, I would say, down each side. I only wanted a little tiny solid strip to help frame this up and really make this center strip the star of the show. This is where everything's happening. Because the images in this particular stamp set are a little bit smaller, I always like to kind of make the background that I am putting them in smaller. And I will be linking to some other cards at the end of the video that I used this, some holiday cards, where I did the same thing. I made a thin strip across the card to really showcase the images so that they had a lot less real estate to have to fill in, I guess, is a good way to put it. So I will link to some other cards and another idea for doing that at the end of the video. Another little tip, I want to stamp and emboss Happy Valentine's Day on this heart. We've inked it with distress ink. Distress ink stays wet for a little bit. You always want to make sure that your inked background is completely dry before you try to stamp and emboss. Otherwise, the embossing powder could stick to more than just what you're stamping. So I did line up my stamps. I'm going to put them in the MISTI, pick them up with the lid, and I am going to take some embossing powder really quick and my panel, and I'm going to test that. I'm just going to sprinkle the embossing powder right on the heart. I have not inked up my stamps with clear ink yet, and the embossing powder stuck to the heart really bad, so it's still really wet. A little tip for that, if you don't want to hit it with a heat tool, you can always set it aside to dry while you work on the rest of your card, which is what I started to do. I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to stamp my images. I'm going to color my images. I'm going to die cut them, and then I'll come back to that. Well, when I come back to it, they are still wet, so I'm going to, or that heart's still a little bit wet. I tested it again with embossing powder, so I'm going to hit it with a heat tool, which you could do right away if you wanted, and dry that ink, and then stamp and emboss. I am stamping these images on a scrap of Bristol Smooth cardstock. That is so I can color them in with Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. I stamped them with VersaFine ONYX black ink, which is my go-to ink when using the Bristol Smooth cardstock and zigs. It works well with water-based markers. It does not work with alcohol ink-based markers, but with water-based markers it does, which is fantastic because I love the black outline that the VersaFine ONYX black ink gives. I am coloring these images in with, again, non-traditional Valentine's-y colors, so lots of oranges and yellows and peachy pinky reds. I have listed any colors I'm using as I'm switching colors across the top of the screen somewhere. I've tried to make sure that they were out of the way of my coloring. So as you're following along with the video, you can see exactly which colors I've used throughout the design. His little bow tie is red, but then his outfit's going to be a little yellow shirt with gray shorts and suspenders. The hearts, I did stick to red. I often like the addition of red to a project, but the pink flamingo I used to blend that out does tend to give it a little bit more of a peachy color. And then I did cover these with Nuvo crystal drops in White Blizzard, knowing that it was going to change the color a little bit. For whatever reason, I find with reds in particular, I don't really notice it that much with other colors. If you use something like glossy accents or crystal glaze or the White Blizzard crystal drops over zig red coloring, it tends to make it a little bit more orangey. I knew that going in, and it was okay in this case because that is the color in the background of my card. However, if you were creating something else and you really, really wanted your hearts to stay bright red, you might be super disappointed when the color changes a little bit. And so I just want to tell you that right now, that I would probably choose not to do that if this card was very red heavy and I wanted those hearts to remain bright red. My envelope has a touch of green shadow. I really wanted that little touch of mint. My leaves on the roses are mint. The envelope has a little bit of mint, and the wings on the winged heart have a little bit of a mint look to them. I like mint with the peaches, peachy orange colors of my background, so something that isn't traditional green. I'm going to tape all of the coordinating dies, and look how fast this goes. I did not have to cut my dies apart, which is, again, you guys, game changer. So excited about this. Tape those in place, run them through my die cutting machine, and we can start putting the rest of the card together and then move on to our next card example for this. I like to kind of lay everything out. This is my double check before I adhere everything down and commit to where it goes. There are lots of other options. You don't have to use the bouquet of roses or the envelope. There's like another little heart that has a bow on one corner. I think it's like a box of chocolates is kind of what I think it to be. A gift package, a rose, a balloon. There's lots of things. So lots more images than what I used. There's a couple of cupids as well, which is kind of cute, or little girls. I mean, they're not traditional cupid, but there's rose corners, bows, lots and lots of images. I'm only using a fraction of what you get here. While I was talking, I did stamp and emboss my sentiment with white ink, being very aware that I thought black ink would really take away from any stamped sentiments on my card today. And then I popped that panel up with foam adhesive like I said I was going to do at the beginning of the video, which is really going to draw your eye into that heart that's adhered directly to the card base that has the Happy Valentine's Day. We're going to center our girl and boy, have it look like they're holding an envelope in the bouquet of flowers. We're going to pop our little hearts in place. Now, just like I didn't stamp Happy Valentine's Day with black ink, I don't want to stamp the rest of my sentiment, You Are My Favorite, with black ink either. I think that that's going to really take away from the design. I want that sentiment to be part of this panel. I want it to be really cohesive. I don't really want it to be a separate strip or anything like that. I want it stamped directly onto this center strip of my card. And how I'm going to do that is I am going to use a stamp positioner tool, a MISTI, and I'm going to stamp this with the Abandoned Coral ink. If you have the Distress Oxide ink, you're probably going to have a little bit easier time stamping this. Because I'm using the traditional Distress inks, I didn't want to get the oxide out. I want to show you that you can get a good stamped image. It's just not going to happen the first time. That's why you want to use a stamp positioner. I ended up stamping this, I don't know, 3-4 times maybe to get, looks like maybe 3, to get that nice, bold sentiment that perfectly complements and coordinates with the rest of the design. Then I'm going to finish with some little jewels. These are some Buttons Galore red heart jewels. I've been using them a lot in Valentine's themed projects or love themed projects here lately. They are red, but I think they really just kind of pick up what color you're using them with, and I think they're a nice complement and add some nice dimension here. Here's the Nuvo Crystal Drops in White Blizzard. This is going to be the final step, and then I can set this aside to dry while I work on my other card. We're going to cover the hearts, the heart with the arrow, the winged heart, and then the little heart on the envelope. And that will finish up our Valentine's themed card, featuring the favorite Valentine stamps and coordinating dies. I did take a black pen and add some detail to the eyes on the boy and girl. Next, we're going to use the Group Hug Stamps and Dies and the Here For You stamp set. This is a darling large stamp set. So at Christmas time, Big Bear and Bird had a stamp set for Waffle Flower that really covered the whole card base. And I used it for a card. I will link to that. That's another card I'll link at the end of this video. And I love it. It fills the space. It's beautiful. But yet you can still have some fun with your background, which I really, really like. And I am doing the same colorway for the background of this card, Dried Marigold and Abandoned Coral. I wanted to show how it could be used for different styles of cards. So not just a love or Valentine's card. In this case, this is going to be more of a thinking of you, sending hugs style card. The image is darling. You can use lots of different sentiments with it. I love that it has all these different critters. I mean, how cute is that giraffe? For whatever reason, I'm always drawn to giraffes, and I think he's just, or she, is darling. There's some complementary or accessory type images. There's glasses, there's 2 hair bows, there's a hat. Maybe you want to make a little bit more masculine card with a little hat. I think that would be great. A heart, and then there's even some sentiments in this stamp set. There's sending some hugs your way, which is what I'm going to use. But if you want to use something else, you could totally do that so easily. We're going to be stamping additional sentiments on the inside of our card using the Here For You stamp set. If you're looking for a fantastic greeting stamp set that is a here for you, I'm so sorry, you're in my prayers, deepest sympathy, all the hugs, this new stamp set from Waffle Flower is great. I can see myself using this a lot. No one likes to create those kinds of cards, but having the right tools on hand to be able to create those cards, so important. And this image obviously works great for working with these sentiments as well, which I really love. You can color this any way you want and then add these sentiments. I like having these kinds of cards on hand so that when you need them, you have them and you're not trying to create a card when maybe you're upset or hurting for someone. And I think that it's so important to have these on hand. It's been my goal the last few months. Unfortunately, I have needed these kind of cards more than I would like. And it's been my goal that when I'm not needing them to try to make some of them so that I just have them. In fact, I mailed one out last week, and it's just so great to not have to think about it, and you just have it and you're able to send out a hug in the mail to someone. Again, I have listed the colors I'm using for these sweet little critters, which they're mostly all colored with neutrals, which really is going to pop nicely against our peachy red background. I have listed the colors on the screen somewhere. I've shifted them around so that hopefully they are not covering up anything. And I'm playing down here at the bottom, trying to figure out the color combination I wanted to use for the base of my giraffe, which ended up being beige and light beige. One of my favorite things about the Zig markers, and I know it's not brand new anymore, but they are in the newest color family. They've come out with light beige and mid beige, or medium beige, mid beige. I think it's medium beige, which work with the beige color, and that's one of my most used colors, but there are times when you want to lighten it up, for example, right here. And it's so great to have those options. I really, really love that. Brown and light brown is what I used for the spots, which is another of my favorite color combinations as far as neutrals, browns, natural colors go. We'll just work through this image. We've got a couple bears here, a raccoon, a little dog, of course the giraffe that we're coloring now, a sheep, it looks like, a bunny, and then finally a little bird. The little bird is the only thing I added a pop of color to with turquoise green and green shadow. In fact, that will be the last thing I color here. Everything else is very neutral. One of the great things about the coordinating die for this particular stamp set is it cuts out that spot in between the giraffe neck and the puppy. So you don't have to worry about inking or coloring that. I think it just really adds to the overall appeal of this image. Very much like the Christmas set that I'm linking to at the end of the video here. It cuts out those little spaces, and I think that just sets this stamp set apart from others. Because it's large and big, the fact that it cuts out that little spot just really kind of seals the deal for me. I love that. This one comes on a magnetic backer. As I talked about earlier, the dies are detabbed, so all of the dies that coordinate with this, and there are coordinating dies for not only the large image, but the word hugs. If you want to stamp that on a separate piece of paper and die cut that to make it a little bit more of a focal point, you can. There are little rectangular thin strips. If you love creating your greetings in little greeting strips, which I do a lot on my own, there are dies for that that work perfectly with the sending some sentiment and then your way sentiment. So it can have little strips above the word hugs. There's both bows, the heart, the glasses, and the hat. So complete die set that goes with this stamp set. I am only using the large die and then one of the hair bows. We're going to give the giraffe a little bow that's colored with reds. I think that pop of color just ties in nicely with the background that we have stamped or inked and stenciled, pardon me. I did not mention it at the beginning of the video. I left it in the video, but the background was created exactly the same, but left at 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. So it's the full size background for this card since we're using such a large image. I've also left all of the coloring in. I know a lot of you enjoy the coloring, like watching the coloring and seeing what colors are used throughout the design. It's always fun watching these sweet images come to life. This is oatmeal and the vanilla color, which is also a little bit newer color. It's a fantastic one for lightening up images. If you have anything that you need to lighten up a little bit, it's a great color for that. I'm using the same brown and light brown paired with mid brown for the dog. I guess it's mostly just brown and mid brown. It darkens it up a little bit so it looks like a dachshund. And then just light gray with the blender, which is a clear color, which means you can just kind of pull out that lightest color you've used, soften the edges a little bit. It's going to blend anything. Some pink haze for the insides of the ears on the bunny, and then I did do some little spots with my light gray marker. And then turquoise green and green shadow to finish this off. And then we will die cut this with the coordinating die. And the magnetic backer that comes with this is over here to the right. Run that through my die cutting machine, grab the background, and let's figure out where we want to put our sentiments. So I played around with placement. You could put it right in the middle, you could shift it over to the side. I really felt like shifting it over to the left and putting my sentiments over to the right was the best placement here today. You could just fill the entire front with the images and do all of your sentiments on the inside of the card if you wanted to as well. I really wanted to showcase something on the front and something on the inside. So I'm going to take my black glaze pen and go over eyes, noses, the raccoon's mask, anything like that right now. And then I'm going to just hold that down with a magnet in my MISTI and stamp my greetings. Just like I did on the last card, I want this to coordinate. I didn't want it to be in black on the background. And in this one, I didn't really want it to be white. I wanted it to have color. So I'm going to use the Abandoned Coral Distress ink. Using the MISTI, I can stamp this multiple times. I stamped hugs, your way together. I stamped those several times. But the sending some phrase is long and it's not going to fit. So I'm going to customize this a little bit by stamping portions of it so that I'm going to stack those words one on top of another. If you feel comfortable cutting apart your stamps, you could cut those apart and stamp that at the same time, or you can just do what I did. You can mask off the part of the sentiment you don't want to use. I'm using the small square mini distress inks, and so I was really able to just ink up one word at a time, and I'm gonna stamp it as many times as I need to get a nice solid image. Clean that off really good, move that stamp around, find the right placement, and then I'm going to stamp the word sending. And really, I probably should have used the larger MISTI for this. It would have worked a little bit better. The small one was almost too small for this particular orientation of this word, but that's okay. I ended up getting it to work. I'm just going to play with it until I get it exactly where I want it, then ink it up and stamp that about three or four times. And I love the tone on tone of this, but it still shows up really, really well. But you can see that this is where a stamp positioner comes in so handy, because you need to be able to stamp it more than once with the distress inks because they don't stamp perfectly the first time. So we've got our sentiments for the front. We can adhere our big image now to the background, shift it over to the left, and then we'll just trim off any excess that hangs off. And really, it ends up hardly being anything. For as big as this image is, it really doesn't hang off the edge all that much. It's just that tiny little piece. Perfect. I need to fill in something I kind of missed earlier. I felt like just add a touch of color to. And then I decided I wanted that little hair bow. So we'll just take our little scrap of Bristol cardstock, stamp the bow with VersaFine ONYX black ink, color this in with some reds. This was the Carmine Red and Pink Flamingo. die cut that with the coordinating die. And I love that there's a couple of different options. I think if you switched up the sentiments, this would and maybe the colors, you could make this a really darling baby card as well. I think the animals would work well for a baby card. Popped the little bow on the giraffe's head, which I love. Then we're going to finish the front of the card with some of those same heart jewels that we used for the other card. I thought they worked really well for this. Scatter those throughout. So I'm just figuring out my placement, seeing if I want to add any like actually on the image, and I opted at the end not to. Using the Lawn Fawn glue tube and also the crystal katana, which is my new favorite as far as picking up jewels, sequins, little teeny tiny die cut pieces and putting them right where you want them to go on a project. Can't say enough great things about it. I love it. Couple places down near the bottom needed a little more coloring. I kind of cut it off too soon. We're going to glue this to the front of a top fold card base. I usually put the adhesive directly on the card base itself and then take the panel to it. Then I'm going to use my regular size MISTI and I am going to stamp greetings inside the card. I contemplated using black ink on the inside of the card and ultimately decided not to. So we're going to take our card, open it up, just kind of use our magnet to hold everything in place. And I'm from the Here For You stamp set going to use Thinking of You and Sending Love and stamp that with abandoned coral ink. I really felt it was important to match. I think it looks a lot nicer when you open up the card, and you'll see that here in a second. I'll show you the finished design, that it matches. So we need to use the MISTI so we can stamp it over and over and get a nice solid stamped image that matches perfectly. And then in addition to the sentiment, I'm going to take hearts from the Here For You stamp set to really coordinate and complement the hearts on the front of our card. And we're going to stamp those with the dried marigold ink. So again, I'm using the MISTI here so that I can stamp them over and over and get that nice solid light orange heart, which finishes the card perfectly complements the front of the design. I really am enjoying the look of finished cards. So most of the time, or it's kind of been going to be my goal for this year, is to finish the inside of a lot of my cards. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this Waffle Flower January release card showcase featuring several of the new stamps and dies from the January release. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Here are a couple more cards featuring Waffle Flower stamps and dies you might be interested in. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.